In the advent of demand for critical minerals as a result of the push of the energy transition, African countries have been put in a place where they have to strategically position themselves for opportunities that have come with these phenomena that are going on. And today on the People Space podcast, I am joined, in fact, I'm privileged to be joined by two ladies that we will be conversating on concerning how African countries can actually position themselves. And beyond the positioning themselves, the major question that we're asking is how can this push for energy transition, the demand for critical minerals that Africa is obviously endowed with, how can it translate into development that can speak to the positive translation in the lives of Africans? And of course, we will be conversating in those lines. The name is Winston Mavor, and I'm joined by Dr. Lindlyn Moma. And of course, she's not here alone. I'm also joined by Rose Mosi. Now, before we get to hear from these two gorgeous ladies that I have here today, your names are quite interesting, ladies, you know? And I've said names because both of you. So, Rose Mosi, obviously, Mosi, there are two things that come to your mind. For those of you that like the good beverage, you know what I'm talking about. But of course, there's also the Mosotunia Falls. So, Rose, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Moma, on the other hand, there's something that I'll let you in. So at the highest learning institution in the country, the University of Zambia, the Momas are the female students. So all of you are actually very much connected to Zambia in many ways than you think beyond the work that you do. So ladies, welcome to People Space Podcast. And I'll start with you, Dr. Lindlyn. First and foremost, we know that you come from the International Institute for Environment and Development. And for our viewers, we've got a tradition where people would just like to know who it is that they're, listening and interacting with. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at the IIED.
Thank you for having me, Watson. It's a pleasure to be here, be in Zambia with my colleagues, Rose, and also with you. But also, I think I must be grateful to CTPD and our host who have really made sure that this journey is possible. They've welcomed us here and they've been, helping us to understand the context of critical minerals, the regulatory frameworks in Zambia, and we're really been so impressed by our trip so far. So a bit about me. My name is Lindlyn. Thank you for introducing me. I serve as a Director for Strategic Impact Research and Strategic Impact at IIED, and I basically support research programs, making sure that the research we do with all our partners in majority world countries is able to produce not just evidence, but use that evidence to shift policy and systemic change broadly across the continent or the majority world countries, but also in the global north. And I've been at IIED for about 2 years now. IIED is based in the UK. We have 2 offices in London and Edinburgh. I work remotely from the US.
Interesting. Rose, obviously, Rose Mosi.
Yes, thank you. Thank you again for the warm welcome. Yes, I love the warmth of Zambians. I'm not a stranger to Zambia because I've been coming here the past few years on a project we've been working on with CTPD and our colleagues at ZLA. And I think you've heard about it, the Advancing Land-Based Investment Governance project, which we're calling Align, that has now come to an end. But besides that, I am a senior researcher in the Law, Economies and Justice team and at IIED. So I work with Lindlyn and with other colleagues within that team, and we look at how we can renegotiate the law for a fairer society, for a more just society. And so that's a bit of what I do. I am a Kenyan by birth.
Jambo.
But I also love Zambia as a country. I think it's a beautiful country. And I've been enjoying the Nshima.
Wait. There's a name that you guys call it in Kenya. I'm just trying to remember. I didn't want you to say it. I wanted to shine.
But fun fact, we also call it Sima. The proper Swahili is Sima.
So the proper Swahili is actually Sima, which is not very far from the way
Shima.
we call it here.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
In
Ugali
fact,
is more popular.
my English teacher used to argue, he was in the same class with Robert Mugabe, the president of Zimbabwe, former president of Zimbabwe. He used to say Shima is the Western pronunciation. The correct one is Sima. That's what the man used to say. Anyway, Both of you ladies are lawyers, and I'm glad that you are in this noble profession, based on what you've explained. But one would obviously want to understand, from law to venturing or transitioning into the development space, to get yourself involved, as Rose mentioned, negotiating, having a seat on the table to negotiate for a fair and just society. Dr. Lindlyn, what inspired the transition for you to focus on this path?
So I have always been interested in the law. I guess I've always wanted to work in peace and developmental issues. It stems from a background of having been involved in a civil war when I was very young. Well, being involved, not actually fighting in the war, but
Having that
in the
experience.
space of being in the civil war, and that affected my, I think it shaped my thinking around just pursuit for peace. But this war that I was involved with, I could see that it was around natural resources, how access and equity issues around natural resources was really unbalanced, causing, people to want to just fight for these natural resources. Also, not to say that this was only in country, but also looking at how global powers, come into these natural resources and, the politics around it. So from that background, I have always wanted to be in the justice space, the equity space, specifically in the natural resource and environmental sector. So it's not a sector that I kind of moved into by accident. I think my background shaped that. Then I obviously pursued law and peace and human rights and environmental justice. So, that's how I've been in this space. I've focused a lot on natural resources and mining issues and the governance around it, not just in Zambia or other parts. I've gotten to work with communities affected by mining, worked on legislation on mining issues, but also around developmental issues from natural resources. Yeah.
Rose, coming to you, I stand to be corrected, but I believe during the course of your work, you've had an opportunity to work across different countries in the extractive space. What drives your commitment in this field?
That's an interesting question because I would say energy wasn't my initial field. Actually, I wanted to do telecommunications law.
Okay.
But that's story for another day. But then I got into the energy field, let me say natural resources field. I think as part of my heritage as a Kenyan, environment is predominantly what we earn our revenue from, but also my parents are agriculturalists. So that love for the environment and nature, flows from there. So I would say partly that is how I ended up in this field. But yeah, the question. I'm trying to remember.
Interesting. But anyway, we will definitely obviously get back to it. Dog, coming to you. But dog sounds nice, Yeah, so obviously coming to you, in my preamble I mentioned that, there is a demand. We've seen quite a lot, coming on board, countries that have significant vested interest in critical minerals, beginning to reshape their developmental approaches to developing mineral-rich countries like Zambia itself. In view of this demand, I would like to find out from you, what opportunities does this present for mineral-rich countries across the African continent?
It's interesting that we call it critical now, and I guess it's critical because who is asking that question, how critical it is? Yeah. So I'm sure you come to the issue of critical for whom. But we've always had minerals in Africa, haven't we? We've always had, I was involved in the civil war around natural resources and talk about forests, talk about diamonds. These are all natural resources. So when we talk about critical minerals, it's for who? Why the rush now talking about critical minerals? I think there's a good awakening on the continent that, hey, we've had resources for a while, but there has been a shift in perspective that we have been advocating for the past 25, 20, 30 odd years. I don't want to reveal my age, women never do that. But it's something that we've been working on the continent for a while. And that shift in perspectives, like, hang on, these minerals, they're not going to be there forever. They're finite resources. We'll dig them up. We'll mine them, they would cease to exist at some point. So at which point do we say these minerals should transform the way we operate as a society, the way we approach development, not just development, but sustainable development. At which point do we start saying that these minerals should add value, not just to the citizens who sit on the minerals, so the communities we're talking about, but also to the national and regional spaces in Africa. So going beyond the national, but looking at the regional spaces. It's really important that that awakening is happening now. It's something I applaud. I think it's something that has been there even when we were talking about the African mining vision. Now we're talking about critical minerals, critical strategic minerals. The reason around one of the facts that this is critical is because there's a security interest around critical minerals, which, security, is it security for Africa, security for global power, security for whom? Apart from talking about the finite resources, there's a developmental question around those critical minerals. Africa is getting to the point where we need to achieve Vision 2063, which has a huge part on not just development, but infrastructure. So how do we use these minerals to kind of take us to another level of development in Africa, another level of security, another level of regional integration? So when we're talking about critical minerals at this time, those are some of the questions that we need to bring forth around the criticality of these minerals.
I'll come back to you following those interesting thoughts, that you've shared, that have sent my mind wandering a lot. But let me bring in Rose real quickly. The IIED obviously has been providing some support, to African countries in relation to the energy transition. And I'd like to find out from you, what are some of the key areas, emanating from your experience in this field? Do you think some African countries require much of this support?
All right. Yeah, thank you. And I think from what Lindlyn said, I think one of the things we need to do first, even before we look at the support, is to define what is critical to us, as opposed to picking up definitions of criticality from other perspectives. And it is okay to share in those definitions, but what do we define as critical to us? I think that's the base. And then that defines the trajectory in which we are moving as Africans. And then we can look at what kind of support we need. I believe we do have excellent technical people within different ministries and even in the private sector and industry. But I think there is need to support in building more capacity. So that would be one. I think technology transfer and just empowering our African governments, African universities to also build their own technology that is relevant to their population, or being able to model technology that's out there to be relevant to our population. So I think that would be a second thing. Funding is a big thing. To be able to drive several things, we need the money. So the money can come from external, but we can also look at ways internally that we could fund different ideas that we have. And I'd pick a fourth one, maybe not last, but I think an important one would be infrastructure. Would need to be able to build infrastructure, to be able to move the goods even between different towns in the country, right? We need infrastructure. So we need to build that in order to support our development ambitions, because I think so far a lot of African governments have indicated that they want to use this particular critical mineral boom to drive development. So would need to develop our infrastructure.
Ambition without corresponding effort obviously may lead to frustration and not achievement of a set goal.
Yeah.
In that line, African governments you've mentioned have expressed interest to make sure that they reap benefits from this. Now, the question I have for you, Rose, is there a political will? And this is emanating not only from what you've said, but case in point, Zambia. Okay, I know you don't want to speak specifically, but I just want to give an example, as you brainstorm on this. Case in point, you talked about funding, you talked about all these things. So exploration is very important, just as one aspect outside. It had to take, a certain company from a certain country that is interested to come here to use high tech to be able to tell us that actually on this particular area, you've got high-grade copper. You've got high-grade copper that you've never had before. It had to take that company to come to tell us who are seated on those resources. So then, if we are looking at benefiting from these resources, shouldn't African governments demonstrate political will by they themselves, Kenya, Cameroon, whoever, Zambia, shouldn't they be the ones to start looking at moving in a direction where, for example, if it's funding, the same limited funding that you have, you start directing it to say, okay, fine, let's increase capacity in our exploration so that we can know even before we are told. So is there a political will to be able to do some of the things that you mentioned?
I think that varies according to the country and the context. And yes, there could be political will, but sometimes there's more than just political will. There's also geopolitics that you're trying to balance. So it's a balancing act. It's not just a very straightforward path. But if I may speak about Zambia, for example, you're doing your geophysical mapping, right? So I think that is the government trying to do something within the means that they have. And that would be indicative of, a positive trajectory. So I think where the governments are doing something in a positive trajectory, we need to acknowledge, to applaud, and to encourage. And of course, where there's more that could be done or better that could be done, we need to also speak out. I think they always say the price for democracy is eternal vigilance. So even we need to be eternally vigilant, to keep the government on its toes, but also applaud it when.
Wonderful. Doc, you mentioned something very, very important about development, with regards the critical minerals, the energy transition. To my auntie who's listening to us right now, who hears these words sometimes in Parliament, from a statement from the Minister of Mines talking about energy transition, critical minerals, and she's, thinking, what animal is this? In simple terms, what developmental outcomes should we be talking? Should an ordinary citizen in Nairobi, Kisumu, okay, in Yaoundé, in Lusaka, what should they be associating critical minerals, energy transition, when it comes to developmental outcome when they hear these words?
So let's unpack energy transition. Yeah, so we talk about energy transition, but energy transition from what? Africa, we're in a state of energy poverty. How many people have access to energy? I'm not even talking about clean energy. We can define clean energy later. I'm talking about just energy supply and access. Africa is one of the most, when we say dark continents, we look at it from the aspect of light. 23%, we don't have energy. So we're in a state of energy poverty. So we're transitioning from energy poverty to energy sufficiency at this point. Not around energy transition because we don't have it. So it's not from dirty to clean energy as maybe there's problem of others. Our problem is just getting the energy first. And so what do we need the energy from? From just simply switching on the light bulb in households, but energy for manufacturing and industrialization on the continent. That's what we need energy for. And we lack that. But we have the Southern Africa Regional Power Pool, for example, that is already looking into these things of how we can help ourselves, to supply energy from one country to the other. Those policies, infrastructure are already in there. Now, if you come to diversifying your energy sources, right? So Zambia, for example, is largely dependent on hydro. Now, what are the other energy sources that Zambia can reap from? But how do critical minerals enable this energy transition? How do the two work together? You do need sufficient energy to even add benefits to the critical minerals, to power the industries that are needed for that. And we don't have them. And that's why for the very longest time, we've been exporting critical minerals in its rawest form. Because in order to add benefits to those raw rocks that we got to see yesterday, you need high-powered industries. Yeah? And we don't have that energy to be able to supply that. So when we're talking about critical minerals and energy transition, I would say let's talk about critical minerals and energy sufficiency, not just for household, but energy for industrialization, energy to be able to achieve. And that's why energy is one of the key pillars of the African Agenda 2063 that really looks at we need energy sufficiency in this continent. We need to move from being that dark physical continent to actually a continent of lights.
Wonderful. Continent of lights. I like that. Rose, Doc mentioned something very important, the issue of clean energy. And obviously the countries that have the capital, to be able to, push for this, and to whom African countries are looking to strategically partner with on this push. I would like to find out from you, how can African countries strategically position themselves to be able to, have access to clean energy? Even as we go, I like what Doc said. Before we talk about clean energy, obviously, first of all, let's have the energy itself. But since we know that there's this huge push, from the funding, okay, how can African countries strategically position themselves when it comes to the energy transition that has emphasis on clean energy?
Right, and that's a good question. From my thoughts, I would say, one, we need to define our priorities. What exactly do we want? How do we want it? For what purpose? So we keep saying, Africa first needs to develop. We need to solve our poverty challenges, education, energy. So we need to have our priorities straight. And those priorities need to be demonstrated in our laws and in our policies. So we need to strengthen our laws and our policies and make sure they're cohesive, they speak to each other, and then we monitor and we implement. We implement and we monitor. I think that would be another bit that we need to work on. And then I would say we also need to strengthen our partnerships. The African Union has come up with the CFTA, the Africa Free Trade Agreement, right? Continental Free Trade Agreement. I think this is something we need to think about seriously, because we're in an era where regional partnerships are important, partnerships between countries and, between regions. So East Africans, West Africans, North Africans, South Africans need to look at how they can support each other before we start looking outwards. So I think those are things that we need to put in place. Those relationships, we need to bed them, and we need to ensure that we are strengthening them. And we also have to speak with one voice when it comes to what we want as a continent and the trajectory we want to move when it comes to the energy transition. And I'd say lastly is look at building things for our people. So putting our communities at the center of the conversations we're having about the just energy transition. So whenever we are thinking of the laws, the policies, the priorities, are we putting our people at the center? Are we listening to what they want? Because we are not transitioning just for ourselves, as when we say government, it's not this abstract thing. It's the people, it's you, me, my grandmother in the village, my mother, my brother. So we need to listen to them, listen to the challenges they have, and then tailor whatever we do to meet their needs.
Thank you very much, Rose, for those interesting remarks. And you are watching the People Space podcast with me, Winston Mavor. Today, I'm privileged to host the two ladies from the International Institute for Environment and Development. And of course, we are discussing and they're sharing their perspectives with regards their recent, boom that we've seen for critical minerals, and of course the emphasis on the energy transition. How can African countries prepare themselves for opportunities that are coming as a result of this? And of course, sharing and giving some insights on what can be done at policy level to be able to make sure that Africa is not again left behind whilst the rest of the world benefits from this. We will be back shortly, and remember, you can get to benefit from a few goodies that we have for you on the podcast that we normally share by simply being interactive on the episodes that we share on our platforms on YouTube, Center for Trade Policy and Development, on Facebook, again, Center for Trade Policy and Development, on TikTok, CTPD Zambia, and of course on X, formerly Twitter, CTPD Zambia. If your comments on any of the topics garners more traction, you might be the lucky winner that may walk away with excellent, souvenirs, t-shirts, mug cups, various memorabilia that we'll give you. So let's get interacting even on important topics like this. And to make things better, we do also offer an opportunity for you to meet some of our guests, just to have one-on-one conversations with them. So let's get interactive and let's get talking. See you shortly.
Hello, my name is Anlewe Anamela. I'm Executive Director for the Non-Governmental Gender Organizations Coordinating Council, NGOs. Please join me on the People Space podcast as we discussed issues to do with Zambia's debt and energy transition program as a country.
Welcome back to People's Space podcast with me, Wenson Mavor. And of course, we are picking up from where we left off. And I'm joined by the two ladies here, Dr. Lindlyn, Moma, and Rose Mosi. And of course, we are discussing, the energy transition, and we're also looking at the critical minerals boom in Africa. What can African countries do to be able to strategically position themselves for opportunities that are coming with these phenomena? And Dr. Lynn, just to come to you, obviously, every opportunity, you can't have opportunity without risk in the picture frame somewhere. There has to be some risk. And it's what makes the opportunity worthwhile, some would say, depending on how one approaches the risk factor. Would like to find out from you, what are some of the biggest risks associated, that rich resource countries face or may face when we look at this critical minerals boom?
That's a very pertinent question and one that is very close to my heart. The reason why I say this is because if you look at the history of mining, whatever kind of resource you're looking for, oil, diamonds, whatever, the biggest risks are those who sit on the land that has the resources. And these are usually your communities, very far away from the city, very far away from the camera's eye, who do not have the voice to speak or to even engage in some of the deliberations around what happens under the land. Now, the law in Zambia and in most African countries says that the minerals under the land is held by the president for the whole country, right? That's true, and we accept that. He holds it in custody, and he then, has the rights, according to the laws of the land, to be able to dig up those minerals, to be able to benefit, the not just the community, but also the nation. However, the communities, the people, you and I, that sit on this land, they are the ones who get their lands to be taken from them. Today, they have a land that they're doing maize farming on. Tomorrow, that land, there's gold under, there's lithium under, and we have to dig it up. Now, as way back, as I've been researching on this and working on this, communities usually get the smallest part or even no part of the stick. They are the biggest risks that we need to look at. Because companies come in with the governments, the history has shown that communities are dislocated, sometimes given some compensation. In most cases, very little compensation. And when Rose was referring to negotiation, it's negotiation for communities as well as negotiations for beneficiation and addition to the product, to the minerals, but negotiating for the communities that they come out well off. That is not just the companies saying, okay, we're going to give you some token corporate social responsibility. We build a school there or house. Like, what are the developmental plans of the communities that sit on those minerals? That is the biggest risk that mining presents. Another risk, so I can go on and on about communities, but we can see that even when it comes to the pollution, the spillages that come, we've seen this a lot. Usually, the first people that get to bear the brunt, or who even reports that, hey, hang on, there's some spillage in my river, is the communities. It's not the government officials, because they're sitting somewhere a bit far. It's the communities. And how do they see that? It's affected the water, it's affected the crops, it's affected their homes. Like you're even digging up, they see cracks in their homes. They are the ones who get to experience this first and raise up their hands. But usually, these communities do not have the ability to be able to go to the company, report it. They do not have the ability to go even to their local councils and chiefs and say, how can we take action? Communities always bear the grunt. And then also the natural environment. When you dig up something, some people say there's sustainable mining. How can it be sustainable? Because you're digging up the land. You're destroying the land to get the resources on that. The natural resources is going to be affected to get the minerals that are critical. So that's another risk that we need to look at. And then the other risk is economic benefits. We can dig it up. As I said, these are resources that will eventually go out. What are the benefits that we're going to get out of it? What is the value addition? What is the economic development from this? So there are many risks that we need to mitigate. Sometimes we always look at the last part of it, economic benefits. How does this help to make sure that, we get energy that we started talking about? But the most critical one, I believe, is a risk to communities, the risk to women who bear the brunt of carrying the family. Usually it's a woman who go and carry the water. I've experienced it, right? And she gets to see the polluted water. Usually it's a woman who would farm. Usually it's a woman who has to take care of the food. So when our maize farms and our crops are affected by pollution, she carries the burden. I'm not saying that men are not, I'm just saying these are facts.
Yeah.
That, usually it's a woman who gets to be when it comes to victimization, it's a woman who doesn't even get to say a voice. It's usually the woman who doesn't have the access to land. So while she's the one farming the land, her husband is negotiating the land rights. In most cases, she doesn't even get access to the land rights and the titles. So these are the intricate risks that, communities face, and we need to unpack them. From the level of, looking at pollution, level at negotiation, differentiation, and even between male and female, in terms of the gender balances that come with mining.
Interesting there. Rose, obviously this, I think Doc did mention, spoke to it, in passing. When we talk about the energy transition, obviously one important area, and you also did speak about it, but I would like you to, just emphasize and speak more on it. The issue of strengthening the regulatory frameworks, the legal frameworks. I think the majority of African countries, this is where we are caught off guard half the time. If the opportunity comes, but your legal framework is not in place, it's not in check, even the benefiting itself becomes a challenge. So how can we strengthen the legal frameworks in view of the energy transition that currently has sparked a boom in critical minerals?
All right. Yeah. Thank you for that. And it's interesting because in many of our countries, you realize the practice and the law tend to be different. What happens, where I come from, we say, things are different on the ground, but that just speaks to the dissonance, that the law is not speaking to the reality. So I think that is a good place to start. We need to understand that the law is the basis for a lot of things. That is how we interact with investors who are coming in, and also the investors who are in the country. That is the first point of interaction. That is what sets the rules of how we operate, the rules of the game, as it would be said. So it's important to get it right. It's important to understand what is truly happening. So one way of framing laws in, I'd say, a logical way is to understand what's happening at the local level, where the mining is actually happening, as opposed to just making laws that are very disconnected to the reality. Understand what the reality is and then make laws that speak to the reality. That would be one way of strengthening our laws. Make sure the laws are not contradicting each other. I'm sure we've had a lot of instances where, one law says one thing, the other law says one thing, or you give one ministry one power and give the same another ministry the same power. We need to get rid of those contradictions because they create confusion, and where there's confusion, it means that anything goes, right? And that means we're allowing for leeway for things that are not really above board to happen. And we're not protecting the people we're supposed to protect, who are the communities. So I think that's another thing. Right now, in an era where we are moving to regional partnerships, and I will hint at the Little Corridor, you now have to start thinking about how do you harmonize your laws across, not just within Zambia. So that's level one within Zambia, but across the board, now at SADC level, Angola, with the DRC there. How do you ensure that your laws are speaking to each other? So that there is your internal priorities that your laws speak to as Zambians, and then how do you then harmonize with the DRC, Angola, so that you have a cohesive body of laws that regulate this particular infrastructure that you share. So we have to think of the law as a strategy of how we operate and then strengthen it that way. But I'd say, again, going back to my point, who is the law being made for? Is it being made for the investors? Is it being made for, the government? And for me, I'd say bring the community to the center. If the law is not working for the people who are most affected, then it doesn't make sense. So we have to make sure that our laws work for our people.
Interesting.
Can I just
Please
add to
come in.
that, please? Huh? I like the way Rose sets it out in terms of who the law is being made for. So you're building from the vision to the strategy,
Yeah.
the policy frameworks,
Yeah.
onto the regulatory framework, yeah? But the vision is there. We have a plethora of laws on the continent. We don't lack. When I say, let me say policies on the continent, we don't lack it. From the African mining vision to the green mineral strategy, we have quite a lot. And if you come down at the national level, all the way to the community level, we have quite a lot. In Zambia, we have a critical minerals framework policy, right? And that is being broken down to the regulatory frameworks, the laws. I think one thing I just want to emphasize from Rose is that who is that law being created for? It's very important. So yes, I know others may say stability of the laws and the regulatory framework is very important for investment and attracting investment. But what else is in that law that we need to interrogate? So it's not just about the laws being there and being implemented, but we need to interrogate the laws in itself so that the laws speak to those in country, the communities, the public sector, the private sector. It's not just speaking to one. And that's why you see we constantly are revising laws in Africa, and that's okay. I have no fault with that. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay we do that. And I think the next part to that is the implementation part of it. We don't want him to be sitting there. And I applaud Zambia because Zambia is one of the countries that have actually signed on to the African mining vision. They saw the vision and they bought onto it. We've seen in other African countries to be able to do that. And you can see that even in the regulatory frameworks of Zambia, the African mining vision is there. So they're moving from the vision, to the policy and strategies up to the regulatory frameworks.
I love the fact that you've spoken to the Africa mining vision and how that can be able to just supplement or maybe get us to where we are supposed to be. Now, one of the critical areas that I would like us to speak to, when we talk about these critical minerals, strengthening the laws, one area that requires, in my view, you are the experts, and I'm glad that I have you for my backup, One area that I feel, African countries needs to work hard in, especially when it comes to strengthening laws, is this issue of exporting raw materials, exporting raw minerals, unlimited processing, no value addition or whatsoever. How important is this? I'll give an example. Zambia is one country, before I was born, there was the talk of value addition, in the Kaunda era, there was talk of value addition. I was born, I grew up, there's still
We're
talk.
still talking.
I never understood what value addition was. Now I understand what I'm. So how important is this conversation, Rose, when it comes to, the critical minerals boom and the energy transition? How important is this?
The conversation on value addition, I'd say very important. Very important, because I think one word I would add, if we go back to the discussion about critical minerals, it is not just for development. Actually, the word is for transformation. We are trying to transform. We're trying to be completely different from what we've looked like in the past. And I think the key that has been identified as a means of driving that transformation is the value addition. So that we move from just the colonial model of exporting minerals from the country, from the mine in there, onto a road or rail out. We're trying to move away from that model. We're trying to move to a model where we are creating value to the minerals within the country, meaning they call it, you're trying to lengthen that value chain and be able to ensure that what you're exporting is a final or almost final product. The result of that is that you're creating other industries within the country that can create jobs, that will need technology development. So we're expanding our ability to have different technologies and other things. So I think that's where the idea of value creation came in. And it was you said it was discussed in the Kaunda era, but it's also in the Africa mining vision, which I would encourage everyone to go and read, because it creates a very good blueprint for what Africa's transformation can actually look like. What we are discussing now is actually the Africa mining vision. If you read it properly, you realize that's what the discussion right now with critical minerals is about. It's all in there. But I think the other important thing that people need to look at beyond the value, just value addition of the different minerals, is how do you create linkages to other sectors, which is another discussion on how that transformation can happen. But coming back to the value addition, I think many things have been said. The difficulties of, how value addition can be done. Do we have the capacity to do value addition? And I think these are all valuable questions. I think the important thing is to identify where we can start. What is our capacity? And be real with ourselves. If we don't have it, we can as well say we don't have it. But then the next question is, how can we build it? You just don't end at, we don't have it. But if we do, where can we start? How can we start? Of course, there's always need for money because you need infrastructure, you need technology and all those things. And then more importantly, we have to realize different minerals, different ways of adding value, different supply chains. And they can look vastly different. For copper, we look different from the one for diamond, we look different from the one for iron or for nickel or for uranium. So we have to think practically. What can we do? Where do we want to add value? To what point or at what point? And who will add the value? But also, who are we adding value for? Back to the conversation about communities. So I will always emphasize, let us put communities at the core of what we do, or think about them when we're having these discussions. So we are adding value for who, why, and for what. So that then guides this value addition agenda. So it's a whole conversation on its own, but I think those are some of the nuggets, to think about when we're talking about value addition. The other aspect of value addition, I'd say again, back to my key point is partnership. I don't think we can do it without beginning to partner with each other as Africans, because you'll be told there's some bits of the value addition process that are pointless if you're doing it just as Zambia. But if you're partnering with Namibia, with Malawi, with DRC, with Zimbabwe, it may make more sense to do it at a regional level as opposed to just having, a copper smelter in each and every country where there's copper. It may make sense to have, one or two. So you have to think about some of these. And that means we now need to talk through our differences and strengthen our brotherhood. In where I come from, we call our neighbors sisterhoods, yeah? Where I come from, we call each other cousins. You just say my cousin from across the border. It's your cousin, yeah. So we need to build that relationship and that partnership to make some of these things a reality. So we move from talking to actualization.
Okay. Doc, I would like to get your thoughts on the same as well. And I know you want to approach this on a broader perspective, but I'll break the rules and limit you to Zambia. In your own thoughts, based on your interactions, based on your research on Zambia, how do you think we can move as a country from just being the people that would mine, extract these resources and send them out in their raw form, to actually playing a role when it comes to processing them, building on what Rose has said?
So it will be the critical mineral sector plays a lot into energy. Yeah. So let me just use the case of batteries. We've talked a lot about batteries. We talked about clean energy. And in order to be able to have, energy from the sun, we need batteries. Yeah. So let's just use the case of lithium batteries. When we are trying to get our solar system, I'm sure you've done that. I'm sure, you want to get your batteries in the house with lithium batteries. Oh, they're the best. They last for the long time, the longer time. Let's go for lithium batteries. Now, when you dig up your lithium, from getting that lithium to a point that is actually used in a battery, that's a value addition. But the batteries that we use now, right, is sent out. It's coming from abroad. It's not made in Zambia or any other African country. It's not made in Zimbabwe that has an abundance of lithium, right? So that's the kind of value addition we're talking about. We need batteries. There's a market for it. But the lithium, we export it, and then we buy the finished products. So that's just a case in point. So we're talking about value addition. Can that lithium be processed in Zambia or in another country? I don't want to speak of Zambia because there's more analysis that needs to be done, in order for it to be a battery. Now, we need to carry those studies out, not just in Zambia, but looking at our neighbors and the regional integration. So Zambia is already talking about this partnership with the DRC on EV batteries. Now, I have my reservations on that because EVs, electric vehicles, How many have you seen on the street, my brother, in Zambia?
From the time I drove here, I didn't see any.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where is the markets?
Probably Europe.
So you are
maybe.
Zambian. Me, I'm not here. I'm here only for a few days. So So if we're looking at EV batteries, so obviously the market for it here. If you've not seen it, you are here for. So apart from that, the days that you drove around. So where's the market for EV batteries? It's not Zambia. So we do need to export it, but we need to look at the markets. What do Zambians need? What do our continents need? From this to be able to access it. So for us to add value, we need to analyze the market. We need to look at the capital. We need to look at the technology. Yeah, Africa has the markets. Apart from our Zambian borders, there's a markets around. There's a regional market that we can be able to tap into. Look at the technology. We always talked about the fact that you need to look at even the regional integration when you're looking at technology. We don't need to have a copper smelter everywhere. We can have it in one place, and then we get the products from our neighboring countries. Yeah, we get the raw materials from our neighboring countries. Look at capital. We talk about attracting investments from abroad to be able to put in our minds. But there should be some thinking around what can Africa, what can the region do to pool our investments together? So we don't need to limit our capital, and we don't need to limit our regulations to be able to attract capital from abroad. Yeah? So those are the things that we talk about value addition, not just in terms of the finished product, but in terms of value addition for the markets, the African markets, the African growth and transformation and development. That is the value addition we're looking at.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lindlyn there. Rose, obviously, unfortunately, we have to conclude our conversation. My director just signaled me there and said, I know you're enjoying, but hey, we've got to close. So I would just like to get your closing remarks and submission.
Well, yes, I was also just beginning to enjoy the conversation. But I'll close with a short story, if you'll allow me, to underscore what Lynn just said, and maybe to underscore my last point. A good friend of mine told me a story of a guy who imported, I think it was a Tesla, an electric vehicle. And he imported it into the country, I won't say which one, and then he flew it or found a way of taking it to his village, probably by road, couldn't be flying. So took it there. And once in a while, he'd get it out of the parking and drive it in his compound and pack it back. And so people would ask him, how do you charge this vehicle? You're somewhere in the village. Guess what he would do? He would buy fuel to fuel the generator to charge the vehicle. It makes no sense, right? No. Because the electric vehicle, it's anti what the electric vehicle was supposed to do, cut our emissions. It's now become part of the process of contributing to the emissions. The point is this, that whatever we do, we need to be relevant to our situation.
Yeah.
We need to be relevant to our context. So we need to understand what our context is and be relevant, as opposed to be reactionary or responding to external contexts at all times. And I'm not saying we should not look at whatever is happening in the world and understand what the geopolitics are, but we need to look at that in terms of what we want, what do we need, and where do we want to go, and then contextualize a plan that works for us. So in this whole discussion around energy transition, critical minerals, what should we do? Should we gain? Should we not gain? Let us ensure that we have understood ourselves and put ourselves at the center of the discussion, as opposed to centering other issues or other countries and other people.
Interesting there, but I strongly suspect that gentleman must be from Kenya.
Maybe.
I strongly suspect. If not Kenya, maybe Ghana.
Let me blame my own people. At least I know they will still have me after this conversation.
Okay. Dr. Lindlyn, your closing remarks, obviously from you. I would also like to just get, as we sum it up, what are some of the 3 key areas that you feel African governments could identify as priority areas as we look at this rising demand for critical minerals?
Thank you. I think it's important to highlight the linkages between critical minerals and the broader economy. First one is critical minerals and servicing of debts. Most of our countries are indebted to powers in the global north. So we don't want to speak facts and figures, but the trend is attract investment, mine, get the revenue from the mines, and service the debts. It's a bad cycle to be in. Let us question that cycle. In IIED, we've done some work around it, and we're willing to develop this work further. So there's a strong linkage between critical minerals and debt servicing. Second one, what about critical minerals and broader transformation, like Rose mentioned? If you look at the sectors that we're thriving in as an African continent, my brother is agriculture. However, we still need to add value and move away from this agriculture with hoes, to some form of
Mechanization,
agriculture. How can our critical minerals accelerate energy or even add some benefits for the agricultural sector? But then we move away from, this hoes and stuff that my mother and your mother, because my parents are into farming, so I can say that, and they're still using the hoes. Okay, that's the second one. And the third one is around regional integration. I think we've made the point here over and over. It cannot be Zambia alone. Zambia's copper, lithium, whatever they find, should not be Zambia alone. Before we were Zambia, we were Africa. This whole Zambia, Zimbabwe, I'm not going to talk about Cameroon, because our situation is more complicated. It is all colonial construct. How can we better go into a form of regional integration so that our critical minerals can benefit us as a continent rather than as a country? And I think we have the structures in place. We have the policies in place. We have the Southern Africa SADC. We have ECOWAS. We have them in place, and we have the tools in place, the African Mining Vision, the Green Mineral Strategy. We have the policies in place. We need to move to a point where we're beginning to implement seriously. So that's 20 years from now. You don't tell me that this thing, Lynn and I, we discussed it. 20 years from now, we're still discussing the same thing. I'll end there.
Can I
Thank
add
you very much. Please.
one more point, which I think we've probably not mentioned throughout this conversation, is the link between land governance and the energy transition. And not to get into it, maybe this is your topic for the next podcast.
For the next episode, that
Yes.
I'll obviously have you on again.
I think our
Hopefully.
colleagues at CTPD would really want to get on this one, yeah?
Okay.
Yes, but
So you've heard for yourself, Mr. Maipopo there.
yes, but the land conflict that is being brought about by, this rush for critical minerals, or let me put it this way, the land conflict being brought about by the energy transition. So you'll have the critical minerals, you'll have the carbon investments, I'll put them in quotes, and other land uses that we have. The livelihoods of the people, as Lynn has said, most of them derive their livelihoods from agriculture. So you find there's a lot of land conflict. So we need to look at land governance and critical minerals, land governance and the energy transition. So that's conversation for your next podcast.
Winston, are you sure you want to end this podcast? Because we can talk.
I know. I think for
We
now,
can end
we'll
it?
end here.
Okay.
Thank you.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch. And most importantly, ladies, thank you very much for coming through. It's been a pleasure having conversations with you, discussing important issues affecting, the resources, the economics of the continent altogether. And my guests have been Dr. Lindlyn, Moma, and Rose Mosi. They are coming from the International Institute for Environment and Development, helping us understand the issue of the energy transition vis-a-vis the increased demand of critical minerals on the African continent. How can we prepare and strategically position ourselves as a continent to benefit, to maximize from these, phenomena? And of course, one of the things that really struck me was the issue of strengthening the legal framework, but interrogating the laws themselves. Do they speak to reality, and who are the laws made for? Once those questions are answered correctly at country level, then we can begin looking at how these issues can benefit the ordinary African in countries, especially that are endowed with these critical minerals. And most importantly, I also like, what was mentioned, by Dr. Lindlyn, the issue of making sure that when we talk about these critical minerals, we make sure that there's sustainability, the community involvement, the people that are on the land that house or host these same minerals, that they're not left out, but they are included. And this is something that I think was so much emphasized even as we were conversing on this important topic. The name is Wenson Mavor. Thank you for watching. And remember, let's be interactive. Let us know your thoughts on this topic, and we will accord you an opportunity to be able to win some excellent and amazing prizes. From me and the ladies, see you next time.